The following presentation is brought to you by kmmedia.pro. Please visit kmmedia.pro for more information. Now stay right where you are as we present Welcome to Positive Talk Radio, evolving ideas one conversation at a time. Great guests, dynamic stories and interviews, plus new thoughts on a wide range of topics and concepts. I hope that you'll hang with me, Kevin McDonald, my friends, and of course, you. As together we work to understand why we are all here and what we can do to make our world a better place for all of us. To be happy, be kind, and live in peace together. Yep, that's Positive Talk Radio. Another episode of Positive Talk Radio. We've got a good one for you today, and I'm really excited to have the young lady that's sitting right over there with us today. And she is a certified, and I'm not sure I'm going to say this right, Elke, so you're going to have to help me here. She's a certified counselor, and we'll discuss what certified means in just a second. She works with people, and she's a psychotherapist. She's got a master's degree, and she's an author. And we're going to talk about her book, which is called Identity, and we're going to talk about that quite a little bit today. And I want to welcome you to the show. It's I feel like you have got an amazing amount of education, and you use your in your spirituality, and you use your intuition to help people live their lives a little bit better. And you're in Vancouver, Canada right now, which is a beautiful area, and it's I hope it's as hot as there as it is here. It's 90 here, and we're in Seattle, so it's great to have you here, and welcome to the show, Elke.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So good to see you. Thank you.
It's so good to see you too. You have been, well, first of all, in your history, you grew up in Europe, and you came here to Canada, and you got your education in Canada, right?
That's right. Yeah, Canada, Toronto at U of T.
Toronto what?
Toronto at U of T, University of Toronto.
Ah, very nice. Very, very nice. And you have got a master's degree and a bachelor's degree. And you're also have another classification as far as a counselor goes. Describe what that is.
It's called registered clinical counselor or registered clinical psychotherapist. And what it means is you have to have a minimum of a master's plus about minimum 3,000 clinical hours of experience before you can get registered. And once you have a registration, it's a registration body by BC, which is essentially monitored. So not everybody, you have to have these requirements in order to join.
How long does it take to get 3,000 clinical hours?
I cannot remember.
A while.
It does, yes. I have been working in this field for about 30 years. So I accumulated lots of experience in Toronto already. And by the time I came out to Vancouver, I think I already had a couple of years of experience. So I had the requirements when I came to Vancouver.
Well, that's just awesome. And I'm glad, you've got lots of education. And you were born in Bavaria, Germany, right?
That's correct. Yes, in a little town in Bavaria, Germany, in the south, where everything is groovy, and it was a small, beautiful town, idyllic, looking like some set out of a movie, with patrician houses and churches.
Oh, that's it's so, and it's been around a long time. So it's got the architecture from the Middle Ages
That's right.
and moving forward and stuff.
It's
So
a medieval town. So there's a medieval tower which was built in 1316 in order to look out and see if there was any danger. People would be on the tower and alert the population that danger is approaching so you could defend yourself. And that medieval tower still stands. And
that
it's
would be that would be cool. Is it a tourist attraction now?
definitely, yeah, it's a town about 100 kilometers northeast of Munich, and it's one of the jewels of Germany. But it's a bit of a secret. People, don't come to it like Munich, um, even though it has the second biggest Oktoberfest in Germany. It's the Oktoberfest that all the locals go to. The Oktoberfest in Munich is where tourists go. But Straubing, my hometown, has millions of people every year in August.
Well, here's a tip for folks. If you go to a foreign country and you're going there for like an event like Oktoberfest, always ask the locals where to go
That's true.
because they know because they go to the local place that is the really cool place.
Yeah, I used to love that Volksfest. It's called, not Oktoberfest, and it's in August. I used to love it as a child. I used to go there with my dad, mostly my Jewish dad.
Ah, yes, yes, and that's ultimately what you wrote the book about,
Hmm.
and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But before we go there, I got to ask you because I was reading your bio,
Hmm.
and I wanted to. You do a lot of family counseling, and
Yeah.
you also do something that you incorporate spirituality appropriately. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Hmm. Well, I certainly don't have any prescribed spirituality or religion I personally prescribe to, but I've had some spiritual experiences myself, which surprised me. So, those experiences taught me that there's so much more to life than what we can see. And this I integrate into my practice. Of course, if somebody is totally atheist and doesn't believe in it, it's not appropriate. And I'm not here to judge. So I'm going to go with whatever the person is capable of hearing.
That is absolutely perfect, really. Although I'm. Have you worked with a lot of atheists? Because I don't understand honestly where they're coming from. Because when you look at the world, you look at nature, you look at all the things that are available to us,
Mhm.
and to not believe in something greater than yourself is hard for me to comprehend that somebody would because I've known people that said, "No, no, no, honestly, when you're dead, you're dead." It's like,
Mhm.
that doesn't seem like a very nice ending to a wonderful life for me.
Mhm. The thing is, people have the right to their opinion. So I don't personally try to change their minds. I find it kind of sad that the person thinks that everything is over because I had these experiences that taught me that there is so much more that we can't see. But these people are strictly scientific and they say, science proves to me that this is it. We are some kind of miracle that all the cells aligned and we certainly uh, have a great life, but then that's it. And so I don't try explain that away. I can understand their position, but personally, I feel much better to know the spiritual things that I've experienced.
Well, you know what the fun part about that is, and how I look at it is, I don't judge. I try not to judge either because what they do is perfectly fine because
Mhm.
they're going to find out at one day, the one day that they pass away, they're going to find out that they were absolutely dead wrong.
I like that.
You
Yeah.
know, so it's like, holy crap! I guess there is something else after that. So um, so they'll figure it out. It doesn't matter between here as long as they don't indoctrinate other people into that kind of negativity and stuff. Then I have no issue with it.
Right. It's the indoctrination that's really hard to take. And I certainly speak up against it. And I tell people, like, if they indoctrinate, usually it comes from such a rigid position, and usually they get into a lot of hot water in relationships. So I do tend to be kind of challenging because people need to be somewhat uncomfortable to change. And so I don't shy away from making people somewhat uncomfortable to get to that new learning, that new knowledge. So possibly I've put some doubt into the minds of atheists. Uh, it's quite possible.
I think you probably do. they they may not say it to you, but I'm pretty sure they'll walk away from the conversation and go, well, maybe I need to rethink this.
That's true. Yeah, I've heard that.
I'll bet you have. And looking at your website, I see all kinds of really wonderful reviews, and including the gentleman who wrote, and his name escapes me, but the gentleman who wrote "Good Things Happen to Good People,"
Yes.
which is a real famous book, and it's been
Yeah.
out there for a little while. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
and
he's an amazing guy. I met him in person and we really connected. And he has been super interested in my work and super supportive. He has done extremely well. He has been traveling throughout the world and has been on Oprah, of course, and all the big places.
as you might be soon, because your book just came out a little bit ago,
Yeah.
came out in January.
Mhm.
And it's growing and it's doing well. The name of the book is Identity: From Holocaust to Home, and and it involves your dad. And does it also involve your grandpa?
It does involve my grandpa, who was one of my earliest memories. He is a was a wonderful man. Unfortunately, he passed when I was 4 years old. But he was a Hitler objector, and uh, and as the German in 33, the German Nazism was really coming into force. They actually already shut down people who were actively voicing their opinion. And my grandfather was one of those people. So they actually arrested him and put him into Dachau. Dachau was the first concentration camp built in Germany for Germans who objected to Hitler's propaganda.
That and I was thinking about you were born at a time, and I talked to my mother quite a little bit about this. She passed away last year. She was 90.
Mhm,
The events that you have witnessed over time, from the time you were born, including World War II, the Holocaust, all of that, and then moving forward through the 50s and the 60s, and then the
mhm,
computer age and the
mhm,
jet age, and all of that stuff. You've seen quite a lot, haven't you?
mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, so many changes. It's quite bizarre.
Are you computer literate?
I I am now.
I know. Well, the only reason I say that is because it's hard for those of us that grew up in a house that had a rotary phone. We didn't even have a answering machine back in the day. They hadn't even invented them yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And if the line was busy, you knew somebody was home, but and that's the
yeah.
only way that you knew.
I grew up on in my teenagehood, I listened to cassettes, and that was my entertainment. And that's how I learned English. I listened to English music. I thought my English was really good because I understood some of the songs I was listening to, but it was on cassette recorder.
Who were some of your favorite artists that you were listening to at the time?
At the time, I was listening to um, Cat Stevens,
Oh,
Sad Lisa, and
yeah,
It's a Wild World. That
yep.
certainly encouraged me to go out into the world myself and come to Canada. Another song that inspired me was San Francisco, like all these songs about where you could go and, have some adventure. I certainly was ready for some adventure.
And that's like in the 60s, if memory serves me right, and
Uh,
60s, early 70s.
60s, early 70s. Yes, 60s, early 70s. That's when I was a teenager. Yeah.
Also, so was I.
Yeah.
So that that works out really quite well. I graduated from high school in 1975.
Uh-huh. Right.
So so what motivated you? Now you're a therapist, you are a counselor, you've got lots of things going in your life. What motivated you to write a book about um, your dad and the Holocaust and what he went through?
I thought he might ask that.
You did.
And honestly, there's so many things that motivated me to write that book. I don't know where to start with. Probably one of the first things was when I was a child, I knew that there was something terribly wrong. And I knew that I had a mission. I had a mission somehow to tell that story of what was wrong. And fast forward to 50 years later, it had to be told because it was high time. I could not suppress the story any longer. And the thing is, we need to own the sides that we have neglected, that have essentially created holes in our personality because we have not paid attention to them. So we don't own them. And it became increasingly clear to me what I needed to own. And it was wonderful to write it. First, I wrote for the German audience. I had been asked to send my manuscript to a German publisher, and immediately he sent me a message, we publish it. Within a day, I had the publisher in Germany. And that was really freeing because I had the publisher so quickly. I knew there was a need. I knew people wanted to know, and I could write to the German audience. I knew exactly what they wanted to know. They wanted to know what was really going on with you in Germany.
Hmm. Well, and I'll tell you, it's not very often. I'm sure you know this. It's hardly never, ever that you send a manuscript or a book off to the first publisher and they read it and say, "I'll publish this tomorrow." Normally, you get lots of rejection letters and you got to do a rewrite and you got to. So that's pretty powerful that you were able to get all that done.
Yes, it was pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting. And that publisher was amazing. Yeah, and not only did he say, we'll publish it tomorrow, he made it happen. Within 8 months, I was published. I had to go through a grueling editing process. And of course, everything had to be in German. I worked with his editor and his team. And then he had an absolutely wonderful book launch. And that was at Kristallnacht, which is the night of broken glass. So he planned it so it would be on an auspicious day.
The
In,
Night of Broken Glass. What
yeah,
is that about?
That was the first in Germany. It was November 10, the night into November 11, and it was essentially the first ruin of the Jewish population, because the Germans came around, the Nazis came around bashing in storefronts. That's why it's called broken glass, and essentially beating up any Jew who would be in the vicinity, and robbing, plundering, and demolishing anything of Jewish worth.
That is terrible. But
Mhm.
the interesting thing is that fast forwarding to today, there are people who need to talk to you and need to read your book because they need to understand that the Holocaust, number one, it actually did happen.
Mhm.
Because there are some people who say it was a figment of somebody's imagination. It actually did happen, and it affected a lot of people in a very negative way. And 6 million Jews were killed, and
Mhm.
but that wasn't really the entire story, because many more people lost everything. That it was, and that's part of the identity or the reason for you
Mhm.
to write the book, and to bring that history forward so that people understand what actually was happening back then.
Absolutely. If we don't tell that story dies with us. And the people's history can be a lot more sketchy than these days, especially in Canada and the States. In Germany, it's still pretty fresh. People
Mhm.
are very aware, and I now talk about it. When I grew up, it wasn't talked about for 20, 30, 40 years. There wasn't much. People wanted to shut up about it. And now it's totally blossomed into, yes, we did that. But it's not like there is any kind of retribution in Germany either. It's just that it's come more to the forefront, and the history is more alive than here.
Now, my understanding is that they've taken, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they've taken it to heart of what
Mhm.
happened then, and they are
Mhm.
dedicated to making sure nothing like that ever happens again that they would be involved in. Yeah, is that
Mhm.
fair?
I think for the most part, that's fair. You have to understand, of course, there's people of different ilks, and there is people who don't believe that in Germany as well. And the neo Nazis are also rising in Germany.
Oh, that's terrible.
Hmm. Yeah.
That is just awful. Well, so let's talk about your dad.
Hmm.
And your dad was a professional man,
Hmm.
and he was an owner of a factory, wasn't he?
Hmm. He had a meat factory, which was not at all what he had in mind and what he wanted to be. He was supposed to be he was a wealthy, educated Jew from a wealthy, educated family. But he was 15 when everything was torn away from him. And he spent 5 years, formative years, between 15 and 20, in the concentration camps of wild repute that we really know well. And he miraculously, and due to his own instinct, survived. But he was robbed of his wealth, his health, his education, his ability to be educated, which was in the books. That was his identity, that was his destiny. His family, two of his brothers were rabbis, and rabbis, are people who are very influential in town. So his family was very influential. And of course, the influential people were segregated in that they were targeted sooner. And the Nazis went in and shot the two rabbis first because they were influential people. They shot the family's 3 German shepherds, which were guarding the property, which was the first trauma to a 15-year-old. That's enough of a trauma. And then they took the family. My father had 6. There were 6 children, so he had 5 siblings. He lived, actually, they lived on an apple orchard in the country because it was safer to live there at the time than in town in Poland. And his cousin lived in the house next to him. So the 2 brothers and their families lived together. And of course, they were all deported.
Now, and I know it's probably in the book, which I'm sad to say I haven't read completely yet, but was his sisters and brothers, did any of them pass away during the Holocaust, or did they all make it through too?
About 80% of my family on my father's side was killed. Some of them killed right away, like his 2 brothers. His father tried to escape and he was killed because a Polish farmer took him in. And when the father produced all the gold and all the jewelry, the Polish farmer outed him to the Nazis and he was shot right away. And my father's siblings, he never saw again. And his parents, he never saw again. He looked for everybody, couldn't find anybody. But miraculously, and this is some of the coincidences that really taught me a lot about, synchronicities. He actually located his sister, and he found his youngest sister had survived. And she lived in Montreal, and she had 3 children, of which 2 of them are psychologists, by the way.
Must be in the genes.
It must be. So he did discover that his sister was alive, and that changed pretty much everything in my family, because finally somebody on my father's side emerged. But to come back to your question, since I lost 80% of the family, or at that time I thought it was 100%, because I didn't know anybody on my father's side. So I thought, what are these people like? And I always wondered, about them. And that's probably also one of the reasons why I wrote the book. I needed to give them a voice. I needed to get to know them. And in the book, I accomplished that somewhat.
Well, it's remarkable. I don't know that we could talk too much about the Holocaust and what happened there, because it can't happen again. And we have to all be convinced and assured that it's not going to happen again to folks. And but I thank you for writing the book, because in Germany it was quite a hit, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yes. We had 200 people at the book launch, and they had to bring in benches from the outside because I didn't expect that many people. People were lining up, and it was so well received and well respected. I can't say enough about the German experience.
And I'll tell you, in the research that you've done, to go into a concentration camp at 15 and to be there for 5 years and survive it, and then to come out of it, was very rare. That did not happen a lot.
It did not. And my dad wasn't the most physically strong either. He was, of average height, but I think it was his spirit and his intuition that helped him survive. And at the end of the war, just about 6 weeks before the war ended, he had an inkling that the war was ending because the Germans were shooting people more and they were more uh, intent on getting rid of the evidence. And so he was reading that and he decided he wasn't going to go on that last transport. And he actually decided to force himself to hide among the dead, which he managed. He managed to actually crawl in among the dead and wait till the concentration camp actually emptied. And when everybody was gone, he crawled out from among the dead and staggered into the fields that surrounded the concentration camp and staggered into a little village. There was some farmer. He knocked on the farmer's door, and the farmer, to his credit, opened the door and took him in. The farmer could have easily been shot if anybody had seen that. And the farmer nurtured him. And it was about 6 weeks before the end of the war, and the farm family took him into town, into Straubing. This was around Straubing, and took him into town to the hospital.
He must have. Did he ever recount to you what it was like to be in and amongst the dead for a long period of time like that, and what his mind would have gone through?
Kevin, you cannot imagine what it was like for him when he told me this. I was shaking. He was shaking from top to bottom like a leaf, and he was so upset. I thought he was going to have a heart attack. And it was such an earth-shattering thing to bring up again, to even remember. But he shared it with me, and I was a teenager at the time, and I was truly shaken. But after he shared it with me, we both buried it again, and we both never talked about it again.
How do you think that, because he let it out for you, but then he buried it back again? How do you think that affected his life overall? That all the stuff that he had to, because I'm sure, in addition to that, he saw some really horrific things during that 5-year period. And to bury that, how does a human cope with that and still
Mhm,
maintain some sort of a positivity or some kind of a life?
mhm.
That would be hard.
Yes, you know, he was remarkable in that he sort of picked up, where he could, because he didn't complain that he lost his chance for education. He just said, okay, I've got to make money. Of course, there was nobody there to put him through school, which he would have loved, but he had to learn German. He had to make a life. So he relied on what he could do, which was trading. And he started to trade. And he was smart and he was honest. People trusted him. He started to trade in the German black market. And he met people who really started to like him, and he procured goods for them, and they supported him to open a business. And it happened to be a meat business, which at the end of his life, he told me he absolutely hated. But in the meantime, he made it the best meat business in town. He had a pride in what he was doing. It was quality. He was running the business, and that's not a small feat. If you have a factory and have employees, you have to supervise. He was quality control. And my mother ran the front store, which also had several people. We had lots of employees, and it was quite a lot of work. It was busy all day long. So he both threw themselves into work, and nothing else mattered. And for that, he was highly functional. He just couldn't function with certain things. He had phobias about trains. He couldn't get it into trains or planes because the transports were so traumatic that significantly hampered his life. He could never come see me. My mom wouldn't leave him alone, so they never came to Canada. He couldn't see his sister, the sister who vowed never to step foot into Germany, took her family to come to us. After 27 years, they were reunited because the sister and her family came to us. So his life was severely hampered because of his phobia. He couldn't go into these kinds of enclosed spaces. But other than that, he was highly functioning.
Well, and if he had the best meat shop in town, that would be, because that's not only is that hard to do, but managing the employees and keeping, the quality up and doing all that and keeping the service up, that's quite a feat. And I'm sure that he was proud of himself and that you were proud of him for the accomplishments that he made after the war as well.
I think so. I think he was proud of, having created a successful business. We never had to suffer. They had to start from zero. So he was quite successful. I believe that made him feel very competent and happy. I wasn't particularly proud of him as a teenager. I was fairly belligerent. So I can't say I was too proud at that time. Now
You were a teenager. That's kind of in the job description. That's what teenagers do.
that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
And you're, as a parent, your children know that you don't know anything, and then suddenly when they're about 30, you get a lot smarter. So
That's
yeah.
true. Yeah, I did. I did appreciate them a lot after, I was in Canada for a while. But, being belligerent as a teenager was really helpful because I came to Canada on my own with 2 suitcases, and that was not an easy feat. And if I hadn't been, plucky and told him, "No, I'm not taking the business," I would not have landed in Canada by myself.
Now that also takes a great deal of courage to leave not only your continent but to go to a whole brand new place that speaks a completely different language and to move into in and then to make it work for yourself and to get the education you have. You've got the bachelor's and the master's, and you've done so well. You should be proud of yourself as well.
Thank you.
Now, I do have to say, I wanted to ask you, the name of the book is called Identity:
Mhm,
From Holocaust to Home. What does identity mean to you, and as far as the book goes?
mhm. Identity I chose because really my dad had to reinvent himself completely. He lost everything. He called himself naked, and not because he was naked. He had his pajamas, the threadbare pajamas, but he had nothing, no pictures, no identity, because everything he believed in, his family, his religion, everything essentially was stripped from him.
That explains the name perfectly, because his everything that he was, everything that he knew, everybody that he loved, they were all
Yes.
gone.
Yeah. And there isn't one picture, there's one item of sentimental value. His education was gone, so everything he thought he would be, his identity was robbed.
Yeah. What did he want to be? Had he continued his education? Do you know what he wanted to be?
He was a really good singer,
Oh,
and yeah, and one of the options would have been for him to be a cantor or a rabbi, um, but he didn't want to do that. He wasn't ultra religious, so for him, probably doctor or lawyer, something of a you know cerebral kind of nature, which he was. He was a very thoughtful, intelligent man.
and he became essentially a butcher.
He
Of
did. Well, he didn't actually do the butchering. He hired a master butcher. So he was the boss. They called him chef, which is boss. So he was the boss, and he would tell what was good, what was bad. Like he did a lot of work in procuring all the supplies. He was trading. He was making sure everything was available for the people who did the actual butchering. But he was back in the factory as well, uh, doing the quality control, making sure things were cured properly, there was enough salt or enough pepper, and he was really good at it because the meats like were spectacular.
And those are the days when he was procuring things. I'm sure some of it on the black market, and
Mhm.
it amazes me that throughout all of that, he had to end up when he was released, and he ended up having to turn to the black market to make a living because he couldn't make it any other way.
No, exactly. The black market was thriving, and he found people trusted him, and he did honest business. So I think that was really good for him.
Well, and if you recall, the other interesting thing about that period of time is in 1945, which is
Mhm,
when he was released,
mhm,
when the Allies came and
mhm.
liberated the camps. In
Yeah,
1945, there wasn't much left of Germany. It had been basically bombed to the ground,
yes,
um, and so nobody had anything at that point, and they were
absolutely. Yeah,
and everybody was
nobody.
trying to survive.
Yeah. So yeah, the black market was really the only way to procure things at the time for probably 2-3 years.
Yep.
The Germans as well. He worked with a lot of Germans, and that is part of the reason why he stayed in Germany. A lot of Jewish people cannot understand why he did that, but he had a lot of Germans who actually were very good people, and he differentiated between good and bad people, not between races. So he had friends amongst German people, and he had friends amongst Jewish people, but it was the people with integrity he chose. He was really discerning, and the German people that he chose to actually hang out with were amazing to him. Helped him to find a place, helped him to establish himself in the black market. And these were the people he procured things for, mostly the Germans.
That is amazing. By the way, I wanted to ask you because he did so much, and then he became a successful businessman, and and lived. How long did he live?
He, you see, that's tricky to say. He actually made himself older. That's part of his instinct. When he was coming into a concentration camp, he stood on a stone and proclaimed he was 18, and he was only 15. So we don't know exactly when he was born. He
Ah,
said he said 22, but when I met his sister, she said 25. She said he wasn't that old. So he probably was somewhere between 80 and 84 years old when he passed.
At the end of the day, was he done a lot, and he'd recovered, and he had you, and
Mhm.
he had some wonderful things. Did he feel like he'd recovered from all of that by the end of his life, and then was he proud of himself?
Yes, he was. He was content. He felt
But
really proud of me, even though initially it was devastating for him that I left and he didn't see a future in me being a psychologist. He thought it would be much easier if I took a thriving business, of course. But in the end, I think he felt totally proud of me and he felt very content with having made a life. He was surrounded by people who loved him. He was very loved. And you know that the German people loved him actually is quite an accomplishment. There is a triumph in overcoming those kinds of tremendous prejudice feelings and actually having people that initially had done harm to him actually learn to love him. It wasn't those people who did the harm to him, but if we're talking about Germans.
it's amazing that he was enlightened enough to be able to make that distinction
Mhm.
between people rather than just lump them all German bad,
Yeah,
German awful, and I hate them because
yeah,
there were good people that helped him along the way.
I think so. And to me, that was sort of second nature. Like that's what he taught, and I thought everybody thinks that way, but it's clearly not. And the world would be a much better place if people thought that way and they were discerning between people instead of races and really understood what makes good people, and people themselves take responsibility for what makes them good and bad, because we always have both in us, good and evil, and we can choose good or evil.
Sometimes, for some people, it seems to be easier to choose evil than it is to choose good. I choose to do good, and that's why I'm excited about this conversation that we've been having. You are dynamic, I got to tell you, and being an author and honoring your dad the way that you have with the book. Um, the name of the book again is Identity from Holocaust to Home. And it is a complete story of a man's life that went from death's door to literally sleeping with the dead for a while and then waking up and being able to live his life and to provide for his family and to have lots of friends. And it's a remarkable story, the story of your dad.
Thank you.
And I applaud you for writing it. How long did it take you to write it? And did you put everything that is everything in that book, or did you leave a few things out?
I left a few things out.
I kind of figured so, but that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. I started writing this book in 2016 for real, and then I had this request from the German editor, so I took a hiatus from the English version, and I went to Germany and published in Germany at 2017. So that only took me a year because the publisher was so speedy. And then 2018, I started to translate and get it into progress to do the English version, bring it to the North American market. And that took a lot longer. But I had it published in January 21. So,
Yes, and so that is, and it's been doing well from what
yeah,
I understand,
yeah,
and it's is it? Would you kind of call it an historical novel, or would you call it a biopic? What would you call it?
it's called historical nonfiction.
Ah,
It's written like a novel. but it is nonfiction. It is the truth. It's my story. And so there, you don't have liberty to just say whatever when it's classified as historical nonfiction. But
Well, but
it
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
it has actually gotten some awards for from different in the States and in Canada for historical nonfiction. So that's exciting. Yeah.
It is. It's a. I'm going to go get that book and I'm going to read it because I am interested in history as well, and um, it's just remarkable that he could go through what he did and then come out the other side and it worked out. And I'm glad you wrote the book. It's an important piece and is part of our history that we should never forget.
Yes. It's very important to remember and learn from the mistakes that history has committed. This was an atrocity, what happened to my dad. And I did actually simply not talk about it. Like, how can you, right? But I
Right.
wanted to write a book not about the Holocaust and about the atrocities because I learned that for me, life is about learning. And I think it's all about going forward. And we are all victimized to some extent. But if we learn how to go forward, so my dad learned to not complain and stick with the victim mentality. He never was like that. He became a victor in itself, in that he took control of his life to the best of his ability, even though he had ample opportunity to complain.
And he decided not to because it
Yeah.
wouldn't do any good anyway.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so it's a great book, and I'm glad you wrote it, and I'm glad you're the other thing that I think is really really cool is that you have taken your life and you have made it something special, and you're helping people every day live their lives just a little bit better, and that's really cool for you to be able to do that.
It's true. I do get a lot of enjoyment out of that, helping people to change their lives for the better. There's nothing better than actually going home and feel like you've accomplished something like that. I'm very fortunate that way.
Well, not only are you well, I don't know that fortunate is the right word that I'd use. I think that you're driven. You've made a decision that this is what you're going to do, and you then went out and decided to go ahead and do it, and you didn't take no for an answer.
Yeah, it definitely took a lot of sticking with it, a lot of determination and perseverance to get to where I had to get to. Because coming to Canada was um, is quite sketchy. I had, very little English. I had no student visa. I had a visitor's visa. I had $3,000 to my name, and my parents were hoping I would come back very quickly that way, but it didn't happen.
No, because you have what I call authentic grit, which means that you really were not going. You didn't take no for an answer. You were going to follow your heart, follow your passion, do what you wanted to, what you felt was in your heart to do, and then you weren't going to take no for an answer. So you just kept on going and you persevered through, through all of it. And I can't think of any situation that could be as dire as going to a brand new company with limited funds and not know the language and not have a work visa and not know any, and then be able to turn all that around and become a highly educated, highly successful woman who is an author of a great book. You must be proud of yourself as well.
Well, I tend to be more humble, on the humble side. It's kind of hard for me. That's probably part of my trauma. And I find a hard time to sort of take a break. There's always, yeah, you're quite right about being driven. There's always something I need to do. And I think when you asked me earlier, why did you write the book? There is a mission. Like, I do want to make a difference in the world. I want to change the world for the better. So I can't rest on, too long, because there is a lot to do.
There is I don't know if you've noticed, but there today seems to be a lot more to do than there was yesterday,
Yes,
because we seem to be going backwards in some manner or form.
yes, exactly. So yeah, it's serious. We need to put our thinking cap on and make sure we make a difference.
Absolutely. So, what I'd like to do now, but before we go, and by the way, Elke is the author of the book Identity from Holocaust to Home. Go get it. It's on Amazon. It's everywhere. It's a great book. It's a great story of perseverance and resiliency, and somebody who wasn't going to quit. And that's her dad. He passed it on to her, and they both are. Both of you are what I would call authentically grateful people, because you have really kept going and doing what you needed to do. So, but I want to step aside for the next couple of moments, and I'd like you to tell our audience, and there are actually quite a few people listening today. I would like you to tell our audience anything you would like them to know about anything, and I will step aside, and please, the floor is yours.
Well, that's a big surprise. I'm talking to my audience. That is wonderful. I don't know who is out there, but I'm sure grateful that you are actually present with me at this time. And the first thing that comes to mind is that at 13 years old, I spoke about Eichmann to my class. 13-year-old, I would have been grade 7. And that was in front of a nun who took quite offense to me speaking about Eichmann. At the time, these kinds of things weren't talked about. And maybe it's difficult for people to listen to those kinds of things now as well. So I truly appreciate you guys hanging with me and being interested in history and making sure that these kinds of things aren't repeated, and making sure that we have a voice, that these stories of trauma do not get suppressed. We want to be able to express them without reliving them, and we want to be able to learn from them. So I want to send a heartfelt thank you to all of you who are present right now.
And I want to thank you for coming here and doing the show. I feel I've been uplifted by your courage, by your steadfastness, and your work ethic, and also your dad's. And I know that when he passed away, he was unbelievably proud of you and of himself for what he went through, and he came out the other side, and he did better than most could have done. So congratulations, and thank you for writing the book. It's an important book. It needs to be read. It needs to be in libraries in this country, even though some people are trying to take books off of shelves in the libraries. It needs to be out there so that people can understand what happened, and that the Holocaust was real and had real impact on a lot of people's lives. And it, for his entire family to be wiped out by the Holocaust is in today's we can't even imagine what they went through.
No, we can't. And for people to assert that kind of nonsense is infuriating. That's an understatement, because it certainly is real. He lived it. His life, his identity was destroyed. And like I said, we need to give a voice to those kinds of stories that cannot be repeated. It cannot happen that people take liberties like that.
Well, and the important part is that what you did is by writing the book is you gave him a voice for something that for something that he Holly Berry just said she's I'm buying you a cup of coffee on your website. Deep interview. Thank you. So that's funny. But I just want to say that rather than see what would have happened had you not written the book is your dad would have lived his life, he would have passed away, and over time what he went through would have been forgotten. And now it is memorialized for all of time so that people can pick up the book. And there's going to be people who are going to pick up the book. It may be a secondhand store, it may be in the library, wherever they find it, and it's going to touch them. And his life goes on now because it is going to touch other people's lives, and hopefully they won't make the same. They will help humanity not make the same decisions again. So that's how important this work is in your book.
Thank you, Kevin. You have been amazing. My dad would have liked you.
I can only tell you how humble that makes me, because he I admire him for and thank him for. I'm not sure. I was while you were telling me that story, Elke, I was thinking to myself, okay, would I go lie in a ditch with a bunch of dead people, or would I let them shoot me? And I'm not sure what decision I would have made.
Mm-hmm.
But he had the ability and the courage to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
it's hard to get your head around it, but
It really is. So thank you so much for being here.
thank
And
you.
we're gonna have to keep in touch, and you're gonna have to tell me how the book's doing, and
Yeah.
if you'd like to come back and talk about your practice and being a counselor and doing what you do, I would love to have you back.
Sounds great. You're wonderful to talk to, so I would like that.
Very cool. Very nice. So if you'll wait right there, I have to do this, and then I'll be right back.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for enjoying this episode all the way to the end. Please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. This has been a production of positivetalkradio.net. Please visit our website, oddly named positivetalkradio.net, for more details about us and our mission, which is to provide great positive programming designed to inspire us all. I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm proud of these shows, and I truly hope that you'll like them and share them with friends and family. So on behalf of our entire team, remember, be kind to one another, because